most men never notice the invisible forces that govern desire. They believe that attention, constant availability, or relentless pursuit is what makes a woman want them. They are wrong. Desire is not a transaction. It is a psychological response, a tension between what is available and what is scarce. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Humans are not drawn to abundance. They are drawn to challenge, to uncertainty, and to that which they cannot fully possess. The man who understands this wields a power so subtle that it can make a woman obsess without her even realizing why. A woman's mind is far more reactive than men often assume. She craves not just a man's attention, but the thrill of earning it. When a man is always present, predictable, and endlessly giving, her mind categorizes him as ordinary. He becomes background noise, unremarkable and expected. Desire diminishes. But when a man withholds, deliberately, strategically, he triggers a cascade of psychological responses. Her mind begins to imagine him in ways he could never manufacture through constant presence. Each absence becomes fertile ground for anticipation, and every brief interaction feels like a reward she must earn. She begins to chase not just his attention, but his approval, his recognition, and ultimately his scarcity. Withholding is a paradoxical form of power. It is not cruelty, nor is it disinterest. It is control exercised with subtlety. A man who withdraws at precisely the right moment allows her mind to fill the void, to replay his words, his gestures, and even his energy again and again. Every delay, every unanswered message, every postponed meeting is a seed of obsession planted in her consciousness. She begins to question, to wonder, to anticipate. And anticipation, Machiavelli would argue, is one of the most intoxicating stimulants of desire. The psychology behind this is fascinating. Dopamine, the chemical of anticipation and craving, is not triggered by routine or predictability. It is triggered by uncertainty and reward. The man who is endlessly present is devalued by her brain. He becomes predictable and therefore forgettable. But a man who withholds activates her neural circuits in ways that make her emotionally invested without her realizing it. Every interaction becomes amplified. Every gesture becomes significant. Her mind starts creating stories, imagining possibilities, and replaying moments in a loop, each iteration pulling her deeper into fascination. Withholding also signals authority, confidence, and self-mastery. A man who controls his attention demonstrates that he is not governed by desire. He governs it. Women, consciously or unconsciously, are attracted to this type of power because it is rare. The paradox is simple but profound. The less a man seeks to please, the more a woman seeks to impress. The less he invests in her, the more she invests in him. In withholding, he becomes a scarce commodity, a man whose presence is no longer a given but a privilege. Yet withholding must be deliberate and precise. Too much absence risks fading into irrelevance. Too little diminishes intrigue. Timing, subtlety, and unpredictability are essential. A delayed response, a subtle refusal, a momentary disengagement, these create a tension that the mind cannot resist. She begins to internalize the game without realizing it. Her thoughts revolve around him, not because he forced her attention, but because he allowed her mind to chase him, to invest emotionally in the gaps he intentionally left open. This strategy also leverages the most ancient of human instincts, the fear of loss. Women respond powerfully to scarcity because it triggers the mind's protective mechanisms. When a man is not easily obtained, when his attention is not guaranteed, her desire grows exponentially. She is compelled to chase what seems elusive. Obsession forms not because of manipulation or coercion, but because withholding taps into a fundamental law of attraction. The mind craves what it cannot fully possess. Every interaction with a man who withholds becomes charged with meaning. A smile, a text, a fleeting touch, all are elevated beyond their ordinary significance. He has transformed scarcity into magnetism. And here lies the most curious secret. The more she invests in anticipation, the stronger her emotional attachment becomes. Desire is no longer rational. It becomes compulsive, a psychological loop that she cannot escape. Timing and rhythm are essential. Absence must be balanced with engagement. Too much withdrawal leads to indifference. Too little reduces fascination. Each interaction should feel like an event, a subtle reward in a sequence of intermittent scarcity. The more she invests mentally and emotionally in anticipating your presence, the deeper her attachment grows. She begins to structure her own behavior around your availability, often unconsciously, reinforcing the psychological pull you have created. Even minor acts of withholding accumulate power over time. A text left for a few hours, a compliment given sparingly, a subtle delay in meeting, all are invisible levers of control. Over weeks and months, these small actions shape perception. She comes to value your presence not just for what it offers, but because it is not freely granted. Her mind begins to crave the unpredictability, to measure her own emotional state against the tension you maintain. This is the slow, relentless work of fascination, executed through subtle, disciplined withholding. Finally, the combination of scarcity, unpredictability, and subtle reward creates obsession. Her desire becomes compulsive, no longer rational. She imagines interactions that have not occurred, overanalyzes your behavior, and seeks ways to earn your attention. Each withheld word, each delayed response, each moment of controlled absence becomes a psychological thread pulling her closer. By the rules of Machiavellian attraction, this is mastery. The man who withholds does not demand desire. He cultivates it, he engineers it, and he lets it grow organically within her mind. By now, the patterns are clear. Withholding is not merely a tactic, it is the architecture of desire. Men who master it understand that obsession is built not through generosity or availability, but through scarcity, unpredictability, and the subtle orchestration of attention. Yet, the final level of mastery comes when these principles are applied with precision, almost invisibly, to create a psychological gravity that pulls her deeper into fascination, almost without her noticing. The first key is anticipation. Every man who withholds successfully understands the rhythm of expectation. Each interaction is crafted so that it leaves an imprint, a tension that demands resolution. You do not fill every silence. You allow her imagination to fill it. She begins to replay your words, your gestures, and even the spaces where you were absent, constructing scenes, conversations, and emotional resonance that are far more powerful than reality itself. Anticipation is the lever that transforms curiosity into obsession. Next comes the calibration of reward. When you finally engage, the intensity must feel proportionate to the absence. A short conversation, a single touch, a meaningful message. It must carry weight. Each interaction becomes an event, a psychological reward for a mind that has been conditioned by intermittent scarcity. Her brain registers these moments as significant. The dopamine surges associated with unpredictability reinforce attachment, and the more she invests emotionally in earning your attention, the stronger her compulsion becomes. Emotional withholding is equally crucial at this stage. A man who reveals too much of himself too quickly dissipates tension and diminishes fascination. By sharing selectively, by keeping his inner world partially concealed, he ensures that she continues to invest mentally, attempting to decode the mystery he presents. Her imagination becomes the engine of her desire. The less she knows for certain, the more powerful the pull. She is not chasing him consciously. She is chasing an idea, an enigma, a carefully constructed perception that only he can maintain. Social dynamics reinforce this effect. The man who maintains independence, who does not cater to every social expectation, who retains his boundaries, elevates himself unconsciously in her mind. She observes his behavior, notices his self-mastery, and interprets his restraint as strength. Scarcity in presence becomes scarcity in value. The interplay between what is accessible and what is deliberately withheld creates a tension that she cannot ignore, a gravitational pull that grows over time. Another layer of mastery lies in the strategic contrast of warmth and withdrawal. A man who is intermittently attentive and consistently intriguing creates a psychological rhythm that mirrors the very mechanics of obsession. She experiences periods of engagement, followed by subtle distance, each cycle amplifying her craving. The mind does not respond to monotony. It responds to peaks and valleys, to tension and release. You become the force that structures her emotional experience, a conductor orchestrating desire without overt effort. At the peak of this process, withholding transforms from a tactic into an invisible architecture of influence. She begins to anticipate your moves, to adjust her behavior, to analyze every interaction, and to invest emotionally in ways that serve your presence, even unconsciously. Obsession is no longer just possible, it becomes inevitable. The scarcity, unpredictability, and selective reward you have engineered have rewritten her perception of value, making you the axis around which her attention spins. Even the smallest gestures now carry enormous weight. A delayed message, a fleeting smile, a subtle compliment, all are magnified in her perception. The gaps you maintain are no longer absences. They are opportunities for her mind to generate desire, anticipation, and longing. Each withheld interaction has created a psychological imprint, a pattern of fascination that compounds over time. She becomes invested in the chase, in the uncertainty, in the very tension you have crafted. Ultimately, the man who withholds does not simply attract, he captivates. He does not force desire, he cultivates it. He does not rely on charm alone or on superficial effort. He manipulates the unseen levers of psychology, using absence, scarcity, and selective attention to create an emotional gravity that is irresistible. Machiavelli's insight is evident. The subtle application of power, invisibly exercised, moves hearts and minds with far greater effect than any overt attempt at persuasion. For the men who master this, the reward is profound. Women are drawn not to what is given freely, but to what must be earned, to what is scarce, to what challenges them. Desire is no longer a matter of chance. It becomes a carefully engineered psychological response. The art of withholding is the art of creating fascination, of cultivating obsession, and of establishing a dynamic in which your presence is valued far beyond its superficial qualities. The final lesson is simple, yet often overlooked. Desire cannot be manufactured through abundance, attention, or effort alone. It is created in the space between presence and absence, between engagement and withdrawal, between certainty and unpredictability. The man who understands this principle becomes unforgettable, irresistible, and almost impossibly magnetic. He does not chase. He orchestrates. He does not demand, he allows. And in doing so, he unlocks the most potent form of attraction. A woman's mind fully captivated, her desire fully ignited, and her attention drawn irresistibly to him. Machiavelli's insight is clear. Human desire is not won through abundance, but through scarcity, tension, and subtle control. The man who understands this becomes not just attractive, but unforgettable. His presence lingers in her mind because it is rare, his attention treasured because it is intermittent, and his engagement amplified because it is strategically withheld. Desire, fascination, and obsession are all created in the space between presence and absence, a space that only the man who understands withholding can master. Once a man understands the power of withholding, the next step is to implement it with precision. This is where strategy becomes essential. Withholding is not about neglect. It is about engineering desire through calculated absence and unpredictability. A man who overuses it risks alienation, while a man who misuses it fails to create fascination. The key is to strike a balance, to engage enough to maintain connection, but to retreat in a way that makes her mind hunger for more. One of the most effective methods is selective attention. Respond to her, but not always immediately. Make her wait, just enough to feel the absence. When you do respond, make it meaningful. A delayed message becomes a psychological reward because scarcity amplifies value. Every interaction, every word, every emoji carries weight. She begins to analyze your behavior, searching for patterns, trying to understand the reasons behind your absence. Her mind, unknowingly, begins to orbit around you, constructing desire from the gaps you leave. Another potent tactic is controlled unavailability. Do not cancel plans for trivial reasons, but introduce small delays or subtle obstacles. A meeting postponed with a plausible reason, a conversation that is cut short strategically, a social media message left unread for a time. Each of these actions creates tension. She starts imagining the moments you might have shared, replaying them, and investing emotion in anticipation of the next interaction. The absence transforms into longing, and longing is the raw material of obsession. Physical withholding is equally powerful. It is not about coldness or rejection. It is about timing intimacy so that it feels earned rather than granted. Touch, closeness, and attention become rewards, not expectations. When she senses that her access to your attention is not guaranteed, her brain responds with heightened desire. Each encounter feels significant because it is contrasted against the space where you were absent. The mind thrives on contrast, and contrast is the secret weapon of a man who understands the psychology of scarcity. Strategic unpredictability further amplifies this effect. If a man is entirely predictable, the mind adapts and interest wanes. Withholding thrives on subtle uncertainty. Change the rhythm of communication, vary your engagement, and introduce small surprises. Do not become a man whose actions can be anticipated with ease. The more she cannot fully predict your behavior, the more her mind becomes invested in tracking it. She begins to notice every nuance, every shift in tone or expression. And this heightened attention intensifies fascination. Even conversational withholding plays a role. Do not over-explain, do not overshare, and do not reveal your emotional landscape too quickly. Mystery is magnetic. When a man allows only glimpses of his inner world, he compels her to fill in the blanks herself. The imagination is far more potent than reality. She begins to construct narratives about you, each more compelling than any version of yourself you could consciously present. In this way, withholding becomes a force multiplier. You do less, yet the psychological effect is enormous. Social dynamics also offer opportunities for strategic withholding. Being slightly aloof in group settings, maintaining independence, and not seeking validation publicly signals self-mastery. Women notice subtle hierarchies, power, and autonomy, often without articulating it. A man who is available only on his terms, who does not bend to every social expectation, is elevated in her perception. Scarcity here is not simply physical, but also behavioral. Your presence becomes a privilege rather than a given, and that privilege is irresistible. Another layer is emotional withholding. Resist the urge to solve her problems immediately, to agree with everything she says, or to constantly validate her feelings. Emotional scarcity creates engagement. She begins to seek your perspective, your approval, and your guidance. Not because she cannot survive without it, but because your energy feels distinct, rare, and valuable. The brain equates emotional scarcity with significance, and significance is one of the foundations of obsession.